He came with a can of spray paint and a heart full of rage. 13-year-old Jonah had one message for the bikers who reminded him of everything he'd lost. But when the steel serpents caught him tagging their clubhouse, they didn't call the cops. They invited him in, and what happened next, no one saw coming. The hiss of spray paint cut through the silence just before dawn. 13-year-old Jonah pressed the nozzle hard, his small fingers tense with purpose. Red letters bled across the gray concrete. "You don't belong here," tall, angry, uneven. His breathing came in short, sharp bursts, not from fear of being caught, but from the weight of the sentence he was writing. He didn't hear the door open behind him. "Kid." Jonah froze mid-stroke, the can rattling in his hand. Slowly he turned. The man in the doorway looked like everything Jonah had grown up learning to hate. Black leather vest, thick forearms tattooed with skulls and smoke, a silver chain dangling from his belt loop. His beard was streaked with gray, and a long scar curved down his temple like punctuation. "You done?" the man asked. He didn't seem angry. Jonah straightened his shoulders, hiding the tremble in his spine. "I'm not afraid of you." The man looked at the wall, then at Jonah, then back at the wall. His eyes lingered on the last word, "here," like it meant something personal. "What's your name?" he asked. Jonah didn't answer. Another man stepped out behind him. Younger, taller, muscles like cinder blocks. Jonah flinched. Instinct. He backed up against the wall, ready to run. But the older one raised a hand, stopping the other. "Nah, no chasing." Then he looked back at Jonah. "Look, we've had people come after us before. Neighbors, protesters, angry husbands. But no one ever painted that." Jonah clenched his jaw. "It's true. You know us? I know what you are." The older man stepped forward, just one step, and crouched a little to meet Jonah's eye. "Then tell me," he said, "what are we?" Jonah's voice cracked. "You're the reason my brother's dead." That stopped everything. The second man's eyebrows lifted. The air thickened. The older one, who hadn't moved, finally spoke again. Softer this time. "Who was your brother?" "Caleb. Caleb Bowers. He was hit last spring. On the West Highway. The guy, he was on a Harley. Drunk. Didn't stop." A silence bloomed between them. "I was there," Jonah added, his voice small now. "I saw him." The man lowered his eyes. "We're not him," he said gently. "But we've lost brothers too." Jonah's eyes were glassy, but his fists were tight. He didn't want pity. He wanted blame. Something to hit. Something to hate. "My name's Ray," the man said. "Most people call me Lockjaw. That's Taylor behind me. You want to come in? Or you want us to call your mom?" "I don't care." Ray tilted his head. "You hungry?" Jonah paused. Hunger was the only thing stronger than defiance right now. "Yeah." They didn't touch him, just motioned inside. The clubhouse had blues music playing in the background, and some pictures of old cars and motorcycles, which immediately caught the eye of anyone who entered. A woman in her 50s was sweeping near the kitchen. "Hey Joe," Lockjaw called. "Kid's name's Jonah. He's having a rough morning." She looked him over with a mother's eyes and nodded toward the table. "You want eggs or pancakes?" Jonah blinked. "Pancakes." Taylor smirked. "He's got taste." They didn't ask more questions at first. They let him eat in silence, one foot bouncing nervously under the table. When he was done, Lockjaw handed him a bottle of water and nodded toward the wall. "You tagged it good. Paint's still wet." Jonah's stomach twisted. "You gonna make me clean it?" "No. That's not what you came here to do." Jonah didn't respond. "I've been you," Lockjaw said, voice low. "Not exactly, but close enough. Mad at the world. Mad at people who didn't deserve it. Looking for someone to swing at so I didn't have to feel what I was really feeling." "I'm not like you," Jonah said, almost a whisper. "That takes guts, kid. More than most grown men I know." They drove him home an hour later. Lockjaw walked him to the door, but didn't come in. His mom opened it, eyes wide with panic until she saw Jonah safe. "He was at our place," Lockjaw explained, "painting a message. We thought it was worth hearing." Jonah didn't meet her eyes. She pulled him inside, hugging him hard, scolding and sobbing at once. Lockjaw didn't linger. Over the next week, Jonah tried to forget the clubhouse, but it kept circling back. At school, he snapped at a teacher and got detention. He walked out mid-class, sat on the bleachers until the sun went down. When he came home, his mom was under the hood of her car, swearing at a wrench. The brakes had gone out again. She needed it for both jobs. Jonah wanted to help, but all he could do was watch. The next morning, the car was fixed. No note, just a faint whiff of grease and a glimmering brake line where the rusted one used to be. Jonah asked his mom if she called anyone. She shook her head. Guess it was just a miracle. But Jonah had a suspicion. A week later, the principal called his mom in for a meeting about Jonah's behavior. When they walked into the office, two men were already sitting in the corner, Lockjaw and Taylor. They didn't speak much, just nodded politely and listened. The teacher was rattled. We're not used to this kind of parent involvement from uncles. We're not uncles, Taylor said. We're just interested. Jonah sat in silence. Outside the school, he confronted them. Why are you doing this? You told us what happened, Lockjaw said. That matters. You matter. But you didn't even know him. We know what it's like to lose someone, and we know what it's like to not know where to put the pain. Jonah didn't respond. He couldn't. He walked away. But that voice, the one that blamed everyone in leather, was quieter now. Just listening. Maybe he didn't belong either. And that's why they were showing up. To remind him that someone still saw him, even when he didn't want to be seen. The first thing Jonah noticed that Saturday morning wasn't the silence in the kitchen. It was the smell. Something sharp, metallic, with the warmth of cooling engine grease. He peeked out the window. That morning stayed with him. The quiet. The way the car sat perfectly level on the driveway. The jack gone. The busted brake drum missing. And that boot print on the floor mat, worn heel, leather sole. He hadn't asked his mom right away. But later, while she folded laundry, he tried. Did someone help you with the car? She didn't look up. No. Why? He shrugged. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to him. It felt like someone had heard him. Not when he shouted, but when he whispered. Monday afternoon, Jonah rode the city bus past 3rd and Barton. A crowd had gathered outside the old park shelter near the food co-op. Not protesters, not police, but people. Music was playing. Smoke curled from 2 giant barbecue grills. And standing behind one of them, flipping ribs with a pair of tongs, was Lockjaw. Jonah pressed his face to the glass. Taylor was stacking folding chairs nearby. A few older serpents in faded vests were handing out drinks, smiling awkwardly at a group of elderly women wrapped in shawls. A cardboard sign taped to the table read, "Benefit for Willow Grove seniors, free lunch, donations welcome, no club banners, just service." He got off 2 stops later and circled back on foot, keeping a safe distance. He wasn't ready to be seen. But as he leaned against the stone wall near the playground, watching Lockjaw refill a plate for a woman in a walker, something in Jonah's chest cracked a little. Not like a break, more like a splinter easing loose. He didn't understand why they were doing it, but he couldn't stop watching. That week, Jonah started noticing things. The car repair was only the beginning. A barbecue fundraiser appeared at the nursing home with hot meals and warm jackets. The river path near the school looked freshly cleared. Ms. Coleman's class had brand new art supplies without a single fundraiser. And someone, no one would say who, had covered the cost of the community center's leaking roof. It was like the serpents were following instructions from a book no one else could read. He still didn't trust them. But the math wasn't adding up. They had nothing to gain, no one to impress. And yet they kept showing up. On Thursday, Jonah had another meltdown. It started in 4th period when Marcus, the class loudmouth, made a joke about Caleb's accident. It didn't come sharp, it came cold. The kind of cold that lingers long after the words are gone. Jonah didn't yell. He just stood up, picked up his notebook, and hurled it across the room. The silence that followed was worse than detention. At home, he slammed the door and collapsed onto his mattress. His mom tried to talk, but he wouldn't answer, wouldn't move, wouldn't cry. And when the knock came around 6:30 p.m., he didn't answer that either. His mom did. A minute later, she knocked softly on his door. It's one of the men from the club. Jonah turned his head toward the wall. He says he wants to show you something. Silence. He said you can say no. Jonah got up. The ride was quiet. Lockjaw didn't talk, just drove. Jonah stared out the window, arms crossed. They pulled off a gravel road behind the Serpent's clubhouse, past a cluster of tool sheds and a rusted swing set, until the headlights cut across an empty plot of land. Come on, Lockjaw said. Jonah stepped out. The sky was lavender and bruised with sunset. Crickets chirped in the brush. A folding table stood under a portable light, covered in gloves, seed packets, and a wooden box of carving tools. We want to build something, Lockjaw said. For your brother. Jonah blinked. What? A space. To remember. To feel. Lockjaw stepped closer to a small cleared circle of dirt. We thought maybe a garden. With his name on it. Somewhere to go when the world doesn't make sense. Jonah stood frozen. Why? Lockjaw looked at him. Because you don't need to carry it alone. Jonah's throat tightened. He didn't say yes. He didn't nod. But he picked up a pair of gloves and slid them on. Taylor arrived 10 minutes later with soil bags. Mama Joe brought lemonade. No one spoke much. They worked by lantern light. By Sunday, a wooden bench stood in the center, carved by hand. Jonah chose the shape of the letters. Caleb's garden, soft lines, no serifs. There were stones bordering the edges, a circle of wildflowers, and 2 sets of stepping stones leading in. Jonah painted the largest one himself. It read, "He still rides with me." Lockjaw saw it and said nothing, just nodded. Jonah stayed after dark, alone, sitting on the bench, just being still. And for the first time since Caleb died, he didn't feel like exploding. The next morning, Ms. Coleman paused at Jonah's desk. "Your writing assignment," she said, surprised. "It's beautiful." He looked up. "You okay?" "I'm getting there," he said. And he meant it. That Friday he showed up early at the clubhouse. No one had asked him to. He swept the front walk, collected soda cans, cleaned the brush near the fence. When Lockjaw pulled in, he raised an eyebrow. "Volunteering?" Jonah shrugged. "Seemed like it needed doing. Go grab gloves. You'll ruin your hands." Jonah smirked. Already did. He began showing up every weekend. First, he just cleaned. Then he learned how to sand metal, strip a frame, weld a bracket. Taylor taught him how to hold the torch. Mama Joe showed him how to season cast iron. Even let him flip pancakes one Sunday for the club's brunch. Each small act added something back to him. Piece by piece, the boy who stood screaming in silence became someone new, someone useful and seen. But it wasn't about riding. He wasn't trying to become one of them. He just needed a place where hurt wasn't ignored, where someone stayed, even when you broke. And every time he picked up a tool, lifted a bag, scrubbed a tire, he felt Caleb there. Not fading, just walking beside him. Jonah stood in front of the wall he had once defaced, paintbrush in hand, heart rattling like a loose chain on pavement. The old red letters were long gone, scrubbed, primed, covered in soft gray weeks ago. But today something new would take their place. He had planned the mural quietly, sketching it over and over in a wrinkled composition book. Not just for Caleb, not just for the club, for both, for what they now meant together. The wings came first, massive arcs of metal feathers, each crafted to look like welded gears and rivets, stretching wide across the concrete. Beneath them, a cracked road led toward a golden horizon, with one small figure walking the line alone. And above it all, in bold, brushed lettering, "You belong here." Lockjaw leaned against the railing behind him, arms crossed, watching silently as Jonah dabbed a fine edge along the last bolt in a wingtip. "You nailed it," he finally said. Jonah stepped back, blinking hard. "It felt right," he murmured. The mural wasn't just for Caleb. It was for him too. For the boy who once believed he belonged nowhere. For the boy who walked into a biker clubhouse with a spray can and a broken heart. Word spread. Not in loud announcements or school-wide assemblies. Just whispers. Jonah's mural. The boy who painted the wall. The same kid who used to skip class now tutoring others during study hall. The one seen carrying scrap metal for the club's next charity build. Something had shifted in him, and people noticed, including Marcus. Marcus, who had once mocked Caleb's death, watched Jonah from across the hallway now, not with scorn, but hesitation, like someone standing in front of a closed gate, unsure if he was allowed to knock. That shift didn't come all at once, crept in small moments. When Ms. Coleman invited Jonah to present his mural design in art class, he expected eye rolls. Instead, he heard claps. When his mom found the new steel-toe boots on the porch, perfectly sized with no note, she didn't ask. She just hugged him longer that night. When Taylor let Jonah weld a bracket for the first time solo, and it held, Jonah ran his hand over the cooled steel like it was proof of something deeper than skill. He'd stopped bracing for collapse and started laying bricks. One Saturday, after hauling lumber to the shelter for a new ramp project, Jonah lingered near the workbench inside the garage. Lockjaw was reorganizing tools when Jonah finally blurted, "I want a patch." The clinking stopped. Lockjaw turned, one eyebrow raised. "Say again." "Not a real one. Not to ride. Just something small. Just to wear." Lockjaw studied him, then reached behind the bench and pulled out a folded denim vest, faded and blank. "We don't give these out easy." "I know. We don't give them out to kids." "I'm not asking to be a rider," Jonah said. "Just to be seen." Lockjaw held the vest up. The back was untouched. Then he pulled a patch from his coat pocket. A small rectangle embroidered in dark thread with silver letters. "Prospect in progress." Jonah stared at it. "You serious? You've earned it." Jonah took the vest carefully, as if it were lined with glass. When he slipped it on, something in his chest settled. It didn't feel heavy, felt earned. The next school day, he wore the vest over his hoodie. No grand announcement, just a quiet confidence in the hallway. Marcus saw it, and laughed. "Let me guess," he sneered. "They made you mascot or something?" Jonah didn't flinch. "No, just someone who does more than talk." The laughter faded. The next day, Marcus showed up at the food drive. Said nothing, just helped unload boxes. Jonah didn't call him out, but he handed him a pair of gloves. The Serpents were hosting a community rebuild next weekend, re-shingling a roof for a veteran who just lost his wife. Jonah helped gather tools, coordinated the food list, even set up a sign-up sheet at school. To his surprise, 4 classmates signed up, including Marcus. One girl asked if it was safe. Jonah smiled. "Only if you hate good food and helpful people." The rebuild became a turning point. The kids worked beside the Serpents, learned to hammer shingles, carry beams, and pour lemonade for old men with bad knees. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. And Jonah, moving between groups, answering questions, tying knots and checking measurements, wasn't just a tag-along anymore. He was glue. One evening, as sunset draped the sky in bruised gold, Jonah returned to Caleb's garden. He sat on the bench, now surrounded by blooming zinnias and low, rustling sunflowers. A laminated flyer was pinned to a nearby post. "Community Mural Night, LED by Jonah Bowers this Friday. Bring a brush, make a mark, tell your story." A smile crept in. Planning this hadn't been the idea. Jonah rarely thought past the next moment. But now, felt good to imagine something lasting. Behind him, the clubhouse door creaked. Lockjaw stepped out, sipping coffee from a tin mug. He nodded toward the flyer. "You ready for that?" Jonah looked up at him. The wind brushed his hair back, revealing eyes not dulled by grief, but sharpened by purpose. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." He still missed Caleb. Every day. But now, when he missed him, he had a place to go. A thing to build. A brotherhood that didn't flinch when he broke, and didn't leave when he healed. Maybe he'd never ride, but he was already moving forward. And his voice echoed louder now than any spray paint ever could. The mural night was supposed to be small. just some classmates, maybe a few neighbors, a brush in each hand, a wall to fill. Jonah had even chalked outlines so people wouldn't feel lost. But when he showed up that Friday evening, the lot was already buzzing. Families, teachers, kids from 3 different schools. And not just them, city workers, a few nursing home residents, even the guy who ran the auto parts store. Some wore gloves. Others carried thermoses of cocoa. Everyone had shown up with something to give. Jonah's hand tightened on the paint tray. He hadn't expected this. "Guess your flyer worked," Lockjaw said, appearing beside him, arms crossed and proud. Jonah gave a nervous half-laugh. "Yeah, I thought I'd be painting alone." Lockjaw bumped his elbow. "You never were." As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the clubhouse lot, the mural came to life. On one panel, a pair of worn boots by a roadside, a little boy's hand resting on them. On another, angel wings made from welded bike parts, stretching behind a silhouette planting a tree. Jonah stepped from person to person, offering tips, mixing colors, steadying hands. Somehow, the boy who used to eat lunch behind the bleachers was now showing people where to stand. When Marcus arrived with his little sister in tow, Jonah simply waved him over. "Blank space near the door," he said. "Yours if you want it." Marcus stared for a beat, then nodded. Midway through, a teacher from another school asked Jonah to speak to their art club the following week. Someone else offered to print postcards of the mural once finished, to raise funds for more community projects. Jonah didn't know what to say, so he just said yes. At the far edge of the wall, next to a painted wrench encircling a heart, he signed his name. Not in cursive or with flair, just clear, careful letters. Jonah Bowers, Steel Serpents Prospect in Progress. And underneath, the phrase he once wrote in rage, "Reborn, you belong here." In the following weeks, everything accelerated. The mural made the local paper. A city councilwoman dropped by during a food drive and left talking about a model for youth engagement. But Jonah didn't care about headlines. What mattered were the quiet things. The kid who came up to him after mural night, asking how to draw hands. The teacher who confessed she'd judged the serpents wrong. The letter left at Caleb's garden, folded under a smooth stone, and signed, "I lost my brother, too. This helped more than you know." Jonah kept showing up. To paint, to clean, to weld. He learned how to patch drywall and align trailer hitches. He asked more questions, took fewer shortcuts, and he never removed the vest. Not even when it was hot. Not even when someone snickered in the hallway. He wore it like proof of pain survived and of work still to be done. One cold morning, Lockjaw pulled him aside. "We've been talking," he said, "and the club thinks you're ready for something." Jonah tilted his head. "It's not a full patch, but it's more than what you've got." From a leather pouch, Lockjaw pulled a thin silver pendant shaped like a gear, with the initials CB engraved on one side and SSMC on the other. "For your brother," Lockjaw said, "and for the work you've done." Jonah took it with both hands. His mouth opened, closed. He just gripped the pendant like it was keeping him upright. Not long after, Jonah was invited to speak at a middle school assembly across town. He stood backstage, palms sweating through his sleeves. He'd written down what he wanted to say, but it didn't feel right anymore. So when the microphone buzzed on, he looked at the crowd and told the truth. "I used to think I was alone, that nobody saw me, that I had to fight just to feel something. But then someone asked me why, and they listened. They didn't try to fix me. They stood beside me until I could fix myself. That's what this vest means." He touched the patch. "It's not about riding motorcycles. It's about not running from what hurts." The auditorium was silent. Then one girl stood up and clapped. Jonah kept speaking, painting, building, showing up. He never asked for attention, but the ripples spread. Marcus started volunteering regularly. Another kid, Jake, started cleaning bikes behind the clubhouse on Saturdays. Said he just wanted to learn. Jonah taught him how to check a chain tension, told him to wear gloves. On the 1-year anniversary of Caleb's death, Jonah returned to the garden alone. He sat on the bench with a thermos of cocoa and a sketchbook full of designs, future murals, patches, and symbols. A folded paper rested in his coat pocket, a letter he'd finally written to his brother. The tears didn't come, just silence, then tucked it into the soil beneath the zinnias. As he stood, he noticed something new pinned to the nearby post. Another letter, in different handwriting. Thank you for making a space for the rest of us. I never had one before. Jonah didn't know who left it. He didn't need to, because that's what the club had taught him. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is proof they're not alone. He still couldn't ride, but it didn't matter. He was already leading convoys of change, one kid, one brushstroke, one fixed chain at a time. And the same wall that once held his rage now carried his name. Beneath 3 words that finally felt true. You belong here. This story reminds us that grief doesn't make us broken. It makes us human. And sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who help us heal. What would you have done in Jonah's shoes? Drop a comment below. And if this story moved you, give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that matter. See you in our next video.